Perfect. All right. Thank you, Mo. Hello, everyone. And now that you would know that we are towards the that particular month for AWS, which is huge for them, with reInvent happening at Las Vegas, with about 10 different hotels and venues, with 50,000 people or more at that place. This is something which happens every year, and this year would have been the ninth edition. Unfortunately, given the condition, this could not happen in Vegas in person. So, of course, all the networking sessions, all of that is missed out. But on the better side of it, what has happened is we have had a prolonged reInvent over 3 weeks, and we'll be sharing those details in today's session. All right. So some numbers around this with respect to what entailed for reInvent 2020. So there were 5 keynote sessions, and it was spread over 3 weeks. We had more than 500 sessions, in different languages, and some were repeat and so on and so forth. But it was great. So they did a great job. Quality of speakers, quality of sessions. The reInvent team actually sent out the light rings, the recording devices to them, to each of these speakers, to maintain that standard across all the sessions, and quality sessions from everywhere. As always, there have been great educational sessions on there, and especially for the new releases that happened, there were very good deep dive sessions that were conducted. So I would encourage everyone to register. Like, tomorrow is the last day that was there. 18th of December is the last day for this reInvent session, and some of them are still accessible on that. So I would highly recommend, and soon they will be available on YouTube as well. Right. So from what I went through, there were key announcements, which was about 50 plus, and tons and tons and tons of other announcements that happen and releases that happen, to which we can't even keep a count of. And for the number of people who attended these, as of for the first keynote, which was early December, there were more than 500,000 registrants. That's a 10x registration that happened as compared to if what would have happened in person. So that's the benefit of having it online and free for everyone, right? So that's what happened. So as for the reInvents, as I said, there were about most of the key announcements happened around these 5 keynote sessions that are listed here, which started off with Andy Jassy, and prior to that there was a late night in which there was one announcement which we'll talk about. Then there was the partner keynote for all the partners here. There's some great details in there. If you're interested, do that. I'm not covering announcements from the partner keynote today, because not many partners would be in here. Then we had a specific dedicated ML keynote, machine learning keynote this time around. This was the very first time that happened. And we had the VP of ML, Amazon ML, actually sharing what is being done within AWS and what were the new announcements around it. So hope there are a lot of data engineers and data analytic folks in the session today. I have not been able to appreciate all of those announcements as much as you would, because I'm not an avid user of those services, but I'm sure all of the other data engineers here would appreciate most of the announcements being done in that keynote. Then there was this infrastructure keynote, not many announcements during that, but of course we got to learn on how they are running their infrastructure, right from the cement they use to how they select data center locations and so on and so forth, and even some details on how they introduce the new Mac device in the racks. So that was some good insights in that session. And finally, we had a day before yesterday for us, and yesterday as per the US time zone, which is we had the Werner Vogel's keynote, and that was the very last one, and through which there were some wonderful announcements that came through as well, not during the sessions but post that session that happened, right? So I've broken down my session into various components like compute, storage, and so on and so forth. And I have some topics that I've kept towards the end, which I'll talk about. Right. So as part of the compute, the very first thing that set a buzz everywhere for everyone was the introduction of Mac OS on AWS. So now you can start and have a EC2 server powered by Mac OS, and you could actually run an Apple machine in on the cloud, right? And they have changed a lot of terms and conditions in the backend. Apple has done that recently, and now this makes sense why they did it, because now it is available as a cloud service. There are a few, I would say, a catch, because it is there out, very transparent in the blogs and everywhere. But those who are used to on demand and used to the way AWS works, there are a few things here which are a default and we should be taking care of. The Mac OS instance comes in with a minimum tenancy of 1 day. So that's a minimum tenancy that you can take in, because it comes with a dedicated host tenancy to say, right? So it's not a shared model. So you have a dedicated host. Whenever you ask for a server, a Mac Mini is actually provisioned for you, and then that gets allocated to you, and then you can access it via the console. So if you plan to use it, so the customer benefits here are, if you have a team working to build iOS applications for your iPads, watch, and mobiles, or even for Mac OS, now you could actually do it on the cloud at scale and not have to purchase it, and so on and so forth. So there are few price debates that are happening, but that's for everyone to think about whether it's a good fit for you or not, right? And there was a small line mentioning in the blog that the new M1 Apple M1 chips will also be available on AWS by mid 2021. So that's what they have written. So looks like when Apple moved on from their Intel-based system to M1, they just wanted to get rid of all of them and they sent it out to AWS. So that's a joke and the background that happens, or the chat that happens around the community, right? But yeah, so that's about that. The next thing that I would like to talk about are a few new instance types that have been launched. So the very first one that I would like to talk about is D3 and D3EN. So this one is very specific to give you better or higher disk throughput as compared to the D2 instance. So people from the benchmarking that has happened, D3 instances might provide you about 2.5x higher networking speed, right? And 45% higher disk throughput as compared to a D2 instance. So those who want a high throughput onto your storage, this is one thing to look at. And the D3EN could also give you as much as 100% higher disk throughput as compared to D2 instance. So that's on that. The next one that we have is G480, which is an AMD powered graphic intensive server, right? So that's something that has been introduced. In line with the M5 series that was there was a new instance that was launched called the M5ZN, which is Intel powered, right? And this gives you a high speed and low latency network, right? So this is what its focus is on to provide you here. Then there was a launch of R5B, which was again focusing on EBS performance here, to give you a significantly higher EBS performance. So these were based on the performance with respect to network and so on and so forth. But the next one is very specific to running and hosting ML-based workload on EC2, right? So Habana, the Habana Labs is basically an Intel company, and they have something called the Gaudi accelerators, which is a competitor to the NVIDIA's services that they have. So the EC2, which is powered by the Gaudi accelerators, is basically specifically designed for training deep learning models, so very ML specific. And finally, they launched a new chip. Last year, if you remember, they launched something called Inferentia, and this year they have launched Trinium. So basically, this chip is basically for again ML specific and dedicated to training machine learning models, similar to Howdy, but this will be coming before the Gabbana, the that series, and this is to be launched this year. So now the chips are launched, but the instances are not available yet. So the instances will be available around mid next year, and this will be available both in the flavors of this will be available both in EC2 and in Amazon SageMaker. So both of them will have this, right? And finally, not a new instance type, but a similar flavor. Here, they announced a new flavor of Outpost. For those who are not aware of what Outpost is AWS's service to host the infrastructure in your data center, but is completely managed by AWS, and it's connected to your most closest region. So if in Kuala Lumpur, they would ship the device, a complete rack in your data center, you provide the power, the networking and all of that, and it's still there, so giving you low latency approach for enterprises, but connected to the cloud. So everything is managed by AWS team. However, I think they've had challenges where the rack comes in one size. So there would be instances, I'm assuming, that data centers would not have had the required space to support such a huge one. And that's where they've come up with smaller versions of 1 unit to 2 units, where you can launch it and they would ship it to you, and then you host it in your own racks, right? So that's what one of the services is about. And this again will be available by mid 21. All right. So the next part that we'll talk about is around the topic of containers and serverless. So more specifically to containers now. So one interesting and that caught a lot of attention for everyone was the Elastic Container Registry, which was earlier available, but within AWS only. Now they announced something which is a public one. So this is available for everyone with or without an AWS account for you, right? And it's available to store and share container software, and globally that can be done. And then they also provided like a public marketplace where you can put in everything, and they call it the ECR public gallery, right? So that's what is there. Why was this required, right? Currently, there is an ECR private repository. There's marketplace for containers for partners, but why was this required? So that actually caught some eye. This announcement was done after another announcement that was there, which I'll talk about next. And this justifies why it was there. So coming to this slide, does this ring a bell to anyone? Do you guys recognize what this is?
Anthos. Is it Anthos?
That's right. That is Anthos. So basically, if you remember, Google announced something called Google Anthos to run their flavor of Kubernetes anywhere. They were explicit that you can run it on AWS. They wanted a share of projects running on AWS to run on Google as well. So they did it. So did Azure and a lot of others. AWS did not go that route until now because they did not have to, because they've been the leaders in this and they didn't see a need to do it. But this year, in a very subtle way, AWS announced something called ECS Anywhere and EKS Anywhere. So I termed it as EXS Anywhere. But yeah, the two services that they launched was ECS Anywhere and EKS Anywhere, saying that you can run the AWS flavor of Kubernetes and their distro anywhere on your premise or anywhere on any other account and so on and so forth, which also means you can run it on Google GCP or you can run it on Azure or any other provider, right? So this is AWS's take to go hybrid cloud so that it supports across. So anyone anywhere who wants to move even and support hybrid cloud approach. This is what they have done in a very, very subtle way. And this is why, it's a rare event that AWS doesn't do that very frequently, right? And because this also encourages that you could run your ecosystem outside of AWS, but still under their control. This is supported and powered by EKS distro, which also supports the EKS on AWS. So now that EKS Anywhere is available, my personal thought, I'm not sure how many people would continue to use ECS Anywhere. They have their own pros and cons, but I think there'll be a lot of uptake for EKS as such. And because with the support of EKS Anywhere, they would be able to go to multiple host locations on premise or other things. The next one, which was launched, so Amazon MQ itself has been there since 2017, supporting ActiveMQ, but now they launched support for RabbitMQ as well. So this is a complete managed service for hosting RabbitMQ, especially those who are running RabbitMQ on premise. You would understand the pain to manage the cluster around it, scalability and high availability. All of that is now done. So this is your RDS version of database to manage and complete RabbitMQ cluster. All right. So the next one that we'll talk about is AI and ML. Very specific, and the floodgates were opened up in this one, where they went gung-ho with the announcements that they did. But to my personal opinion here is that this has not been a lot of new services, but it has been addition, and they plugged the gaps that were there in the existing ecosystem of SageMaker. So they announced it as individual services, but this is what I've done. I put it across as under SageMaker, what are the things that were made available. So first thing that they announced was SageMaker pipelines. As the theme was about automation throughout the reinvent, all the services, everything has been around automation, reducing the human intervention in all the aspects. So managed services, that has been the theme, and that has been brought to the AI ML space as well. So in SageMaker, they announced SageMaker pipelines, which is a purpose-built CI/CD service for machine learning, right from your deployment, training, and output. You can develop that and use this pipeline CI/CD framework to deploy your ML workload. The next service that was launched is Data Wrangler, which is called SageMaker Data Wrangler, that aggregates and prepares data. That is again a managed service by them. They followed it up with something called the Feature Store, which allows you to list out all the features built and to be shared across the team, right? So if you want to build it and you want to make it available, that's a feature store, and consider it, I would call it a Git repository for the ML features that are being built, right? Next is Edge Manager. So this is something very cool, according to me. So basically, Edge Manager is like, it's a complete set of tools for model management across the fleets on the edge devices. So basically very much defining and again tying up the IoT space, where all of the models are deployed into the fleet, and you can manage the entire fleet and monitor it and secure it using the Edge Manager. So this is like the system manager that we have. This is for the IoT space, I would say, right? Then we have the next one is the debugger, which is more specific to debugging your profiles and the training jobs that you have done in ML. So those who are into data, you would actually appreciate what this does and how it improves this. I'm not able to appreciate it as much as you do. The last one that I would like to talk about is basically Clarify. Clarify is to help you with the bias, to detect bias. So you have a data model, and based on the data model, you might see that that data set might have a certain bias to a certain topic modeling and so on and so forth. So using machine learning, they for machine learning, they built a service called Clarify, which will help customers detect the bias in the models that are there, right? So that's on that. The next thing that I would like to talk about is DevOps Guru. So last year, if you would remember, there was an announcement or a call Cloud Guru. Oh, sorry, Code Guru, right? That will help you to understand where you have memory leaks in your code, where you have how can your SQL queries be improvised, and so on and so forth. So that was Code Guru, but there were lesser, languages that were supported. Recently in Code Guru as well, they announced support for Python and a few more, which we'll talk about. And supporting that based on the data that they've had, they felt that they can help customers to detect the anomalies that could happen in the DevOps cycle as well. So that's where they introduced something called the DevOps Guru, right? And as part of the Code Guru, as I said, they announced something called a security update, which will help you scan and implement security best practices as part of it. So that's something that I wanted to call out. And finally, as part of Monitron, which is industry-based, analytics device. So this will take you to the industry, analyze it. So they have a set of five. I wanted to put that image over here, but I forgot on that. So they have a central router, and they have like 4 to 5 devices that can send signal. They connect using Bluetooth, and the main device is connected using Wi-Fi. And any abnormalities in the machinery can be taken over and sent for analysis. So that's on the industry side. So that's one thing that they have announced from the actual device announcement. There were a couple of them as well, which I missed to point out, which was around Panorama, which is again converting your camera into something which can help provide machine learning modeling on the video itself, right? So at the edge, you connect them, and then you get video analysis from your camera. So it makes any camera into a smart camera, if I have to say, right? So that's few points on that. The next component that we will be talking about is analytics. So we spoke about machine learning and AI, but now analytics on the whole, there were some crazy announcements as well. The first being as part of DevOps Guru, something called Data Brew, right? So this allows you to, it gives you a GUI where it's a visual data preparation tool, and it will help the customers or the users to clean and normalize data without writing any code. So again, that's another thing that many people will appreciate, where all you need is access to the console, and then you can clean and normalize your data, which can be tiresome and cumbersome, right? So that's one new release that happened. The next one is called Elastic Views. So AWS Glue Elastic Views is the name of the service, and this allows you to create and materialize views across many databases. So this is it is not a take on QuickSight, but a similar one. But this allows you to support multiple sources like DynamoDB, Redshift, S3, Elasticsearch, and many more services are being added in. So these is something that is coming through, and they're adding that in. And finally, the other thing that they have here is with respect to QuickSight Q. So there is a service called QuickSight as of today, where you can build dashboards using this. So something similar to Tableau that you would have somewhere else, right? So you have Tableau or ClickSense or ClickView. You use this, and this is as part of the AWS. You create users for viewing and creating dashboards, and it connects back to your data warehouse in AWS or anywhere else, and provides you dashboard. But there was a problem statement. With QuickSight, you had to write the exact query into the search, and then get the views if you want to search something. Think of the experience of searching something in Kibana, right? So you need to have some understanding of how to write the syntax. So what they did was, now they have enabled something called QuickSight Q, which is an NLP based search, and it understands the business logic behind it, and then inferences and gets all the data based on a human language. You write human language. I would like to know output of business in this hour to this hour, and it will get the data based on that. It's basically a language processing algorithm there using ML, get the data and showcase. So that's something that will help boost the QuickSight business, because that's something which has not been a very big hit amongst the data analytics team because of its limitation. But these features will help with the adoption for it.
So is it like the project manager can now use QuickSight?
That's right. That's exactly what they have tried to resolve.
Right. Because in Astra, we had like this chatbot. I think you work on that project, right? So when we want to get something from QuickSight, we did the dashboard that's called sometime, right? So in this case, then we can just give them access, right? And they can write.
They can search for it, and then real-time data is available. So this is basically making it easy to give access to the dashboard to business users who don't understand tech language.
Love it.
Right. Nice. Right. So that's a new feature that they did. And now moving to Redshift, there's been a couple of other points as well, but one thing that I think caught my eye was data sharing and moving clusters across AZ. So this has been a pain point for our implementations that we have done previously. So now you can share data across the clusters, even cross-region, I believe, with using a simple API call. So that's something that is available now. So Redshift data sharing, that's something to look for. And also now you can move clusters across AZs with just one query, and then it will help you to not replicate it, but actually move it, replicate, and then shut down this. So that is something which is available. A lot of use cases that can be addressed using this. Right. All right. So that's about analytics. Now coming to storage, two great announcements, at least worth the mention, is GP3 EBS volumes. Why is this important? Until now, if you needed IOPS, higher IOPS, you had to increase your volume size, right? Because there was a correlation between it. So if you want higher performance, increase the capacity. Now this with this seventh variation of EBS volume, now you can get independent performance irrespective of what the capacity that you do. So basically, it allows you to provision performance apart from capacity, and it gives you a predictable 3000 IOPS baseline performance. It comes at a cost, but for those who want it, they don't want to spend on the costing, this will give you a good cost optimization capability. And with a click, there's a 5-step method for you to move from the current version GP2 to GP3, so that you can do, right? And the next one for S3, I think many will appreciate this, is now S3 will provide strong read after write consistency. For years, this has been there as eventual read after write consistency, but this is something which has been announced and will be available by default, and you don't have to go through your application to manage this use case where there'll be eventual read after write consistency. So that's one, and it will be available for no extra cost. So then they just improve the performance without increasing the cost, right? So I hope that interests a lot of folks, and especially those who are preparing for your certifications. This is one question that always comes in, and hopefully with this introduction 6 months down the line, that will be updated in the exam as well. But yeah, keep in mind, so this is something to look for. All right. In the security, aspect, there were two things that I would like to talk about. One is an audit manager. So this is yet another product killer, as I call it, because this basically kills products like Gremlin and other things, which, sorry, not Gremlin, the other Gremlin is something else. So the Audit Manager, there are many ones who give you continuous auditing for PCI compliance, various PCI, DCC, iOS, and ISO, and all of those. So now this Audit Manager is out of the box, provided by AWS, and they also have a freaking free tier to support your requirements, right? And as of today, these are the three compliance that are available: CIS benchmark, AWS Foundation benchmark, GDPR, and PCI DSS. But this is available out of the box for you, right? Another one that was announced is Chaos Engineering as a Service. For those who, this is something new. There was an open source flavor of this, which was put into as available to everyone by Netflix, and they called it Chaos Monkey. I think this name will resonate with many. So what Warner Vogels announced was they are announcing a new service which will be available, I think, mid next year, and it will be called Fault Injection Simulator. So this is basically to test your reliability of your ecosystem. You purposefully induce failure to see how the ecosystem responds and recuperates from that. So that's something that has been that will be available as a service. So earlier we had those who were doing the Chaos Monkey implementation, they had to manage the infrastructure and the thing behind it. But now there is an easy console that will be made available. So basically here, if you see, is you create a experiment template, start the experiment with the fault injection, and then fault injection, and then use the monitoring components like EventBridge and CloudWatch, and stop the experiment and see results. So everything on the console. So that's something to look for as well. So that's on security. The next one that we have is on management and governance. All right. So two things that I would like to share is now the well-architected tool that was available on the console also has APIs. So now there could be many other products that will come in to integrate with the well-architected tool APIs. This was launched today morning, where it will actually allow you to add the components and give you a real-time analytics as well. So there are a lot of potential in this, and this is something to look forward for, especially those who are partners who work on compliance domain. This is something where you can leverage and get what the customer wants. Another one that was introduced is Cost and Usage Report, or CUR as we call it, CUR. That is now available in the linked accounts as well. So now they have removed the master and the linked terminology in AWS. Now they will be using the member word. So all the child accounts will be called as the member accounts. So that's where here you see. So the member accounts will now have visibility at that level as well. So that's very interesting for those folks who manage the operations. This is a huge relief because you don't have to break down right from the master account to see what is the breakdown for your individual accounts. So I think that's a good introduction. Yeah, any questions? Okay, all right. So the next one, again launched today morning, I guess, is something around Amazon Location Service. So this is a take on the Google Map dominance. They have been predominantly there, but now with this, there will be an AWS service that you could use internally in the AWS environment and use APIs. And all of this is powered by the global trusted providers of Esri and here. So these are the folks. It is under preview now, limited preview as they call it. But when it goes GA, which is generally available, they will provide routing capabilities as well. So now that's a take on Google Maps or even Azure Map APIs that are out there, or other open source map APIs. So AWS will now have its own location service available. Right. All right. So the next session, these points is towards the end of it that I would like to call out. So these are worth a mention. that has been announced either from Vanavargal's keynote until today afternoon. So these are the few things that have come out, and I would like to share some details on this. So the managed services for Grafana is basically, it'll give you a complete managed and secure data visualization service that you can do. And until now, you had to manage the implementation or use Grafana service. Now this is available here as part of AWS. The next one is managed services for Prometheus, so which is basically monitoring service to make it easy for monitoring your containers and applications at scale. Containerized application at scale. So that's one thing that was announced by Vanavargal. These two were his most lauded announcements that happened. Another one that happened was AWS Cloud Shell. So a lot of infra folks and a lot of developers would love this. So this has been there with other cloud providers for some time, and now AWS has announced this. So on the go for you to manage as a web-based CLI, and you could actually do it. So and it comes pre-installed with most of the kits, right? It comes in with EKS kits and others in there. So it's already there. PIP and all of that is pre-installed. And surprisingly, they give you a storage of 1 GB per user across the account. So it is not, so this is huge because every user can actually push data over there and store it and use it, right, on that Cloud Shell console. And it is available, and that data will be available across sessions as well. Even if you terminate a session, come back, you'll have that data. So technically it is like giving your Cloud Shell environment 1 GB of perpetual storage. And it is not across users, it is per user in every account. So that is huge. So that's something to look for. And unfortunately, it's not available in SG yet, in Singapore yet, but other regions are available. So you should be able to look at that, right? So yeah, that's that. Then, as I said, this time around, they did not announce any deep gadgets. Earlier, at least in the last two reinvents, they announced the Deep Racer and the Deep Composer and all of that. This time there was nothing deep. So they announced something called the IoT EduKit. So that's on the infrastructure side, apart from the Monitron and other aspects. This is now available on Amazon. I think in Singapore it's available for about $42, and it gives you an access to sensors, mic, small cameras. So it's a complete IoT kit that you can purchase and work around if you want to do some hands-on on IoT. This is a good thing to start off with. So AWS have got their own kit in the market, right? Next, as part of the system manager, they announced 2 points, which is change manager and fleet manager. Is basically to manage change management and putting in points where you want to get the required approval and so on and so forth. So that's one thing that they did. So people have done automation using Jira and other aspects for getting approval. So now this allows you to automate that, sending out emails, click of a button, getting an approval, and so on and so forth. So the change management now can be done using System Manager, Change Manager, right? Confusing name, so that's why I separated the part of AWS System Manager, but it's called AWS System Manager, Change Manager. Yeah. The next one that they call is Fleet Manager, is for a complete fleet management. So that's what they have as part of System Manager to manage it. So yes, so that's one. And the last one is a very minor release, but I think a lot of you would enjoy that, is unified search. When you go to AWS console, and if you want to search, let's say users, you can just say users and it will open IAM and go to the users console. So rather than you searching IAM and then going to users, now you can actually search across and even further deep So that's what I've read about. That's something which is available, and you should be able to see that in the console as of today. Right. All right. So that's on the major releases, but I have about 3 to 4 top picks that I have, and I'll share why. I think I have a couple, about 10 more minutes, Mo, just a quick time check. Do I have about 10 more minutes? I would like to pace it accordingly.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, great. Okay, great. So I have about 4 of them. So for me, the top pick of the releases that happened in this reInvent, this tops the list for me, and for a particular reason, right? So Babelfish, what they did is that is a Postgres. They announced something called Babelfish for Postgres SQL Aurora, and Aurora Postgres SQL, and they also announced an open source project around the same lines as well. But what does this do? Basically, let me give you a case study and see what is the problem statement and take that forward, right? So the case study here that we're going to talk about is basically a requirement where you want to move from using a SQL Server database to Postgres, right? So what you would do, so the first step that you have to do is bring the schema and convert the schema from SQL to Aurora. You can do that. There is tool which is your AWS schema conversion tool. You have this. After that, you have to migrate the data from your SQL to Aurora. Perfect. You can do that using database migration service. But however, until now, there's always been a resistance from the customers or who are using it, because you have to rewrite the application as well. Because here the application is actually reading the T-SQL endpoint or the protocol, and if you convert into a Postgres, you are going to use a PLSQL protocol, and you have to adapt the application to actually do that, right? And you have to rewrite the app code and switch the drivers and so on and so forth. So what they did was, what if your application can talk any of the languages? Either your application can talk T-SQL, or your application can talk PL/SQL, and in the backend, it actually uses Aurora database. So that was what Babelfish does. It allows that layer to convert SQL, T-SQL protocol to PL/SQL without you requiring to change the application in one go, right? So here, the way that customers would adopt it is, they would do the migration of database. Application starts using Postgres SQL using Babelfish because the conversion is happening there. Newer applications that are there, the further modifications that in the application you read directly to the Postgres SQL endpoint. So which would mean that the old application will talk T-SQL. The new changes that you do will talk PL/SQL, and then in the backend, it's just one database, which is Aurora Postgres. And gradually, you have the time, you buy yourself time to rewrite the code from SQL to things. So you do away with your legacy gradually. So that's a great feature, and that's why that stands out for me. So that's on Babelfish. They also, what they did was they made the Babelfish for Postgres open source, so which will be available on Git around March next year, and you would be able to contribute to it as well. So as of today, they support store procedures and other majorly used functionality of SQL, and they support it with PL/SQL as well. So they gave us good examples where there is the money type, where in P-SQL it goes up to 4 decimal points, whereas in PL/SQL it goes only to 2 decimal points. So that causes a concern, and that is where the Babelfish manages that to manage the consistency. And now assume that you are using a particular feature of SQL which is not supported by Babelfish. You can contribute to that, and then it will be available for Aurora PostgreSQL as well once it is standardized and it is pulled into that. So that's on that. The next one that stands out to me is AWS Proton. AWS Proton is basically a fully managed deployment service specifically for containers and serverless. But okay, what is it basically? So this one that we speak about is basically a complete service where you have your infrastructure team that you would see, right here you have the infrastructure team which defines the stack and publishes a stack. They say, okay, for microservices you use Fargate, you use EKS, or you use Lambda. So they create that, they publish it. Now the developers have to figure out how do they use it, right? As of today, what you would do is you would write a CloudFormation template and then put it. But then there is an integration required to code pipeline where your developer will be pushing the data, right? So all of that is something which is there, and then deploy it. So that is there. And then monitoring again has come back to the infrastructure team. So this is a process. But with Proton, they make it a seamless offering. What my understanding is, this is basically in the backend the same services like CloudFormation, Core Pipeline, and CloudWatch, and they have put a very neat wrapper around it, called it AWS Proton, and making it seamless for the developers and infrastructure guys, where they give more control to infrastructure team for them to ensure that they can use only this kind of stack. For the developers, they're not still dependent on infrastructure guys, because the deployment, all of that is integrated. That integration layer is done by the AWS Proton. You don't as a developer, you don't have to go through the CI/CD scope of it. And then finally, monitoring and everything from an operations perspective is also made available as part of that. So in case any deployment goes bad or any issues with that, that's also available in the container and in the serverless concept. So this is huge. And especially for big enterprises or even medium scale teams, this is a huge way to orchestrate the entire process. So this is a new service, but I think in the backend, it's well integrated services in the backend that probably you would have custom designed the pipeline as of today, but now they made it available as a service, right? So that's one thing, right? And the next one that stands out for me is Lambda billing. Now, if you would notice, you will be billed 1 per millisecond, right? So earlier we were used to per hour billing in EC2, then came per second billing. Even if you're running an application now, you would be running it for 10 milliseconds. Any function you run on Lambda, you would be using it only for a few milliseconds, but still you pay up for the entire second. So now with this millisecond, you can get huge cost benefits, especially with the new introduction of the large Lambda function with 10 gigabyte support and all of that. You increase the capacity and finish your function, runtime in less than 2 milliseconds, and be charged only for 2 milliseconds. And that would give you better performance and better cost optimization. So since this has been introduced, there's been a lot of papers and blogs out there to how to cost optimize and performance optimize your infrastructure using these two functionality, which is great. So that's one. And now Lambda also supports containers as well. So if you have containers, you can also run that now on Lambda. So that's the second one regarding that. And the last and the final one that I have, and which I would like to call out and which stands out for me, is Aurora Serverless V2. All right. So what is the Aurora Serverless? Just a moment. So what is the Aurora Serverless, right? So Aurora Serverless basically was available to you where you don't have to manage the capacity of the database, but it had its own limitation, right? You could not run it. It did not have global data sets. It did not have, multi-AZ deployments. It did not have read replica and so on and so forth. And let's say in this use case, right, this is where, a step back where it is not serverless, you have to manage your capacity. You have to either, if you have a spiky workload or infrequent, so let's say if you provision for peak, it's going to be expensive, right? If you provision less than peak, end user will be impacted. And if you want to scale up and down automatically at your end, then it is hard, right? Because it requires consistent member required to monitor it and so on and so forth. So these are there. So this is where it's not serverless. Then they introduced serverless, but it had its own issues. So even now to our customers, we always said, don't use serverless for production workload, because the scaling or the replication was, it took time. It was not production ready. But now with the recent launch of Serverless V2, which is still in preview, all of the pain points that are there has been addressed. So earlier in let's call it Serverless V1, right? So in V1, what happened was, in case there was an increase in workload, your compute capacity would be doubled. If you were on 16, you would go to 32, right? So it was 8, 16, and so on and so forth. So even the gradual downgrade of the system was also similar, and the increase was not spontaneous, right? So that was one. The other problem with V1 was global datasets were not available, multi-AZ deployments were not available, read replicas were not available. Even for the support for Postgres was very recent with AWS Aurora serverless, all of those concerns. But now with Serverless V2, this will have fine grain increments. So if you increase by bit, the smallest AC Aurora compute unit, Aurora unit that you would increase is 0.5. 0.5 is the minimum unit that you will increase by. So if there is a slight peak, it will increase immediately by minimum of 0.5 and more, right? So that gives you to scale fine grain increments, which gives you great cost optimization, and it is immediate. In a fraction of a second, you have that in place, right? So that's one. And in the demo that we saw, what happened was when the peak reduces, what happens is there is a step reduction of the compute. So though the increase is like immediate, spontaneous, the downgrade of the compute capacity is basically in a step way. So they go one by one, and that's how it is done. So yeah, so these were the 4 top picks for me that I wanted to share, and I think that would be it. So yes, so for those who are joining for the first time, this is Kaushik, and I'm part of BlazeClan Technologies, Premier Cloud Consult APN partner. I'm also a well-architected reviewer and a community builder and APN ambassador. So thank you for joining in, and open to questions or anything that you would like to share that I missed out on.
Thank you so much, Kaushik. Really enjoyed, because I didn't have time to follow on all the announcements lately. But I really like the Aurora serverless, man, version 2. It sounds like really interesting, right?
Right. It is interesting, very incredible.
So my question is, how did you find the virtual reInvent? Did you really enjoy it as like attending in Vegas, or you find like less excitement virtual?
So of course you miss the networking here, in-person networking. So be it for business or for your personal requirements, in-person networking is always helpful. Here, last time we could not attend a lot of educational sessions there. We caught up only after we got back on YouTube and so on and so forth, but then you don't get to go through all of them. This time around, it was easier. You could plan everything. You don't have to run from one hotel space to the other, waiting for the bus and so on and so forth. So this one was easier in that way. And it was spread out across 3 weeks. So that was tiring, but it was good.
And it was free, of course, right? We didn't pay anything for it.
It was free, yeah, as compared to the 1800 pass that would be there.
Yeah, correct. And is there any service or like any feature you were waiting for it but didn't happen yet?
In particular, I think for me, one is as a well-architected practitioner, I think the well-architected tool is something that is I did not expect that, so that's something which is good. And of course, the serverless. So the Aurora serverless is something where we have had issues where customers want to use it because of the benefit that it gets in. But yeah, that was a good one.